Hello and welcome to today's presentation regarding the changes coming for the U.S. CPA exam in 2017. My name is Michael Brown. I am the National Manager of Faculty and Distance Learning as well as a National Instructor with Becker Professional Education. It's my pleasure to welcome you both on behalf of Becker and Morgan International. So as we look down at from a high level as to why the AICPA is looking to change the exam. This has been a multi-year project. The AICPA is constantly examining how good a job is the CPA exam doing of mirroring what the expectations are of those employers which want to hire and retain CPAs. Well, some of the ones you see listed here. First, they expect new hires and expect staff and senior level auditors, tax professionals, and so forth to have the skills and knowledge necessary to perform more advanced tasks. So they expect them to have a little bit more robust skill set. Coupled with that is that they may be asked to be involved in or certainly contribute to more involved and complicated projects earlier in their careers. Ultimately, this all leads to a necessity for higher level cognitive skills than have previously been tested on the CPA exam, as well as the ability to assess a candidate's professional skepticism. That is to say, how good are they at taking a variety of facts and then without bias interpret those facts and provide some sort of conclusion. So that's the high level reason why the AICPA sought to change the exam. So, before we inundate you with a lot of here's what's changing, let's start with some of the things that aren't. Number one is this will still be a 4-part exam, and it will be basically the same 4 parts that you see here that are the same 4 parts we have today. 1, financial accounting and reporting, or FAR, auditing and attestation, or audit, regulation, which is basically tax and business law, or reg for short, and finally business environment and concepts, or BEC. Secondly, there had been a lot of discussion whether or not they would expand the testing of writing on the CPA exam, and for the time being, they've elected to retain that only on the BEC section of the exam, which is just as it is today. So those are some of the things that aren't changing. However, there are a number of things that are. First off, as I noted, they're trying to elevate the level of thinking that's expected of candidates. Now, the way they explain this is to say the CPA exam traditionally has operated at the first 2 levels of sort of cognitive address, which is factual regurgitation. Can you basically say the information back on the exam? Or application. Can you take the facts and apply them to a particular situation? What they want to move up to is analysis and interpretation and synthesis of information. So taking it to that next level. Now you couple that with an increased emphasis on simulations, and the reason is pretty simple. A multiple choice question can't go too much beyond the application level of thinking, but a simulation can. A simulation can involve a more robust set of facts and can ask you to do a more in-depth analysis. So we're not only going to see an increased emphasis on simulations as a whole, that also is going to include adding simulations to the BEC exam for the very first time. To give you context, this exam became computer-based as it is today in 2004, and for that entire time, BEC's quote-unquote simulations have only ever been writing, never a traditional simulation like you see on the other 3 parts. The third big change is scoring. Now again, this isn't surprising given what's happened in the last 2 iterations of the exam, but what we're now going to see is a 50-50 split. Today, it's 60-40, so on audit, financial, and regulation, multiple choice represents 60% of your score and simulations represent 40%. In the new exam, it will be 50% multiple choice and 50% TBS or task-based simulations. Even BEC is going to respect this new split. It too will be 50-50 in a way. It will be 50% multiple choice. The other 50% will be split. 35% for the new simulations being added to BEC and 15% for the writing, the written communication that has been a part of BEC traditionally. Now the last change is a really good one. The examiners heard loud and clear that students oftentimes don't take the break when they have the option to do so, and a big part of the reason why is that that break is on the clock. That is, that counts against your total time to take the exam. And it's a long exam. So what they've decided to do is they're going to standardize a 15-minute break that will not count against your time. So that way, every candidate will have the opportunity to take a break without having to worry if that's going to adversely affect their time and therefore their score. Now, I mentioned we're moving beyond this level of application to higher levels of thinking, analysis, and synthesis, or sometimes called evaluation. Well, as you might expect, does it take more time or less time to think through a more complicated problem or to provide a more comprehensive analysis? Well, clearly that's going to be a more time-consuming task, and as a result, they're also expecting that the length of time it takes to complete a task-based simulation will increase. If you can think that a simulation might range between 10 to 20 minutes today, well, under the new exam, increase that by, let's say, about 50%. So from 10 to 20 to 15 to 30. Another change is the length of the exam. Now, at least in terms of remembering how long each exam is, this is about to get a lot simpler. Today, there are 2 4-hour exams, financial accounting and auditing, and there are 2 3-hour exams, BEC and regulation. Well, in the new exam, everything's going to be 4 hours long. So it does increase the total duration of the exam. Now, the necessity for this kind of makes sense, particularly for BEC. When you consider BEC, although they will reduce the total number of multiple choice, you still have to make room for these new simulations. That's going to take more time. And then regulation, similarly, they're going to, because of the increased emphasis on simulations, they wanted to have enough time to accommodate that change. So now all 4 parts will be 4 hours in duration. Now, what does that look like in detail? Now, I know there's a lot of information here. What I want you to take away from this is try to look at it from a high level. Let's start at the bottom. That's the simplest. There's no change, right? As I mentioned, the only part that's testing written communication skills is BEC, and they currently do that by posing 3 written communication tasks. Well, the new exam will not change that. It too will pose 3 written communication tasks. Now, look at audit, financial, and regulation in the middle section. Those are the simulations. Now, today, audit and financial have 7, regulation has 6. Well, you'll notice that in the new exam, since they're all going to be the same length and simulations are more important, it kind of makes sense that now all 3 would have a comparable amount of either 8 or 9. Now, BEC, you could say, well, why is it so much less? Remember, they still have to leave room in BEC for those writing samples. So that's why instead of having perhaps 8 or 9, they say, well, we're already going to have 3 of those, if you will, devoted to writing, so we'll leave 4 or 5 others as traditional simulations. Now, not surprisingly, in order to accommodate the additional time needed, as well as to recognize that multiple choice will be a smaller percentage of the new exam's grade, they're cutting back on the number of multiple choice questions, with only one exception. Auditing will be cut pretty significantly from 90 to somewhere in the low 70s. Financial will go from 90 to somewhere in the low 60s. Now, BEC goes down a little bit, only from 72 to somewhere in the low 60s, and part of the reason is, remember, we're adding a full hour to the BEC exam. But then you might look at regulation and say, well, why isn't that changing very much? In fact, almost staying the same, maybe even going up a bit. Well, one of the reasons is regulation already had simulations. They're only adding 2 to 3 new ones, but they are adding an additional full hour. So in their way of thinking, well, that additional hour will accommodate those additional simulations, as well as the fact that simulations should be a little more time-consuming, but that should still leave about the same amount of time for multiple choice. So hopefully that gives you a high-level picture that, in general, a little bit fewer multiple choice, a little bit more in terms of simulation, and then the addition of task-based simulations for BEC. Now, just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, multiple choice today is 60% of the exam, and simulations are 40. And that's true of audit, financial, and reg. In the new exam, it will be a 50-50 weighting. BEC is currently 85-15, 85% multiple choice, 15% simulations, which are just writing. In the new exam, it will be 50% multiple choice, 50% simulations, again split 35 for the new task-based simulations and 15 for written communication. Now, one other note. The examiners have looked at a number of other proposals, and some of them are technical in nature, looking at the actual software platform they use to administer the CPA exam. Now, what they ultimately have decided is that yes, they do want to deploy Microsoft Excel as part of the changes in 2017. But since we put this presentation together, we've clarified that, yeah, they'd like to do that, but rather than complicate the 2017 release with new content and new technology, they're going to postpone adding Microsoft Excel for perhaps another year, 2018. But I would like to emphasize that second point on the slide because it's important today and in the new exam. The examiners have never used spreadsheets as a testable component. They're not going to in the new version either. They're not expecting a candidate to be able to demonstrate their ability to use Excel, but as today, the spreadsheet tool is just that. It's a tool. A candidate can decide if and when they want to use that tool to help them compile their answer. Well, the logic here is candidates, by and large, are far more comfortable with Microsoft Excel, so wouldn't it make more sense to build that into the exam as we move forward? Now, some other things to keep in mind as we now close in. At the time I'm recording this, we are less than basically 12 months, right about at 11 months at the time this recording is being made. What do we have between us and the launch date of April 1, 2017? Well, number one, the AICPA has recognized there's going to be a lot of folks trying to take the exam before it changes. To that end, they're going to extend the testing windows. Today, the testing windows are each 2 months in duration. They're always the first 2 months of each calendar quarter. So, for example, if we're talking in the, let's say, July-August of 2016, you can take the exam anywhere in the month of July, anywhere in the month of August, but not in September. With this new extended testing window, we're adding the first 10 days of that third month. So now you could schedule an exam theoretically from July 1st all the way till September 10th, which basically means there are more opportunities for students to sit. Second, right now, the AICPA has kept to a pretty rigid score release timeline, and they'll continue to do that up until the launch of the new exam. But be warned, once the new exam launches on April 17th, that is going to significantly delay grading, especially if you sit in the second quarter of 2017, that is to say, the very first window the new exam will be given. Right now, they're warning us that it could be a couple of months after the closeout of that window before grades are released. And that makes sense. Part of the reason why is the examiners want to make sure that the new exam and all the new questions are properly calibrated. That is to say, how they weight the grades versus the various questions on the test. Finally, there's no grandfathering and there's no transition. It's seamless, meaning any parts you take prior to the change count. Any parts you don't, you'll have to take under the new exam structure. Which leads to this critical question. If you only had enough time to take one part before the exam changed, which part would it be? And our answer is simple. BEC. Remember, it's going to have simulations for the very first time. It's going to see a significant reduction in the value of the multiple choice. So just in terms of the structure, BEC is undergoing the most significant change. You can also look at the fact that BEC over the last 2 to 3 years in particular has boasted the highest pass rate by a pretty significant margin. One has to think that the AICPA desires to have the BEC pass rates in line with the other parts of the exam, which to us means they are going to try to make BEC more challenging, and one would presume that the addition of simulations certainly will accomplish that. So, BEC is at the top of the list to try to knock out before the change. But not to worry. Regardless of when you end up taking the exam, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4 parts after the switch happens, or if perhaps you sit before the change but don't pass, you're still going to be okay. You know, we take a lot of pride, both Becker and Morgan, in ensuring that our product is consistently and constantly updated. Believe me, when we get ready for launch, we're going to be dealing with not only the curriculum issues, but also the technological issues. We want the new exam to be mirrored in our software, and we're going to make sure that all of our students have the correct information they need to study effectively. So, with that, there is a brief overview of the upcoming changes to the CPA exam. I want to finish by saying best of luck to you in the months ahead. For those of you who plan to try to knock out a part or more before the change, best of luck. For those of you who will be taking the exam after it changes, well, good luck as well. Again, my name is Michael Brown. I'm one of Becker's national instructors, and I want to thank you for your time and attention, and best of luck in your future endeavors. Thank you.